Sometimes a public debate suddenly feels urgent. A group is described as dangerous. The issue appears everywhere in the news, and people start demanding immediate action. When that happens, something bigger than a single argument may be unfolding. Sociologists use the term moral panic to describe situations where a perceived social threat becomes amplified through media, politics, and public concern. In these moments, debates can shift quickly from careful analysis to urgent warning. And once that shift happens, arguments can start spreading faster than evidence. Moral panics usually begin when a complex issue gets simplified into a symbolic threat. Instead of discussing a broad social topic, attention focuses on a particular group or behavior that supposedly represents the danger. This group becomes what sociologists sometimes call a folk devil, a symbol of the problem. That simplification makes the issue easier to understand, but it can also distort the debate. Once the issue becomes symbolic, repetition does the rest. News coverage increases. Commentators repeat the warning. Stories highlighting potential dangers spread rapidly online. As people encounter the same message repeatedly, the threat can begin to feel much larger than the available evidence actually suggests. As concern grows, calls for immediate action often follow. Policies are proposed, restrictions are suggested, and arguments begin to emphasize worst-case scenarios. At this stage, debates often rely heavily on the reasoning patterns we've talked about earlier in this series. Slippery slopes, appeals to fear, anecdotes presented as broader trends. Those arguments can make the situation appear more urgent than it actually is. Moral panics are powerful because they combine emotion with uncertainty. When people believe something could harm society, especially children or vulnerable groups, caution feels responsible. But the urgency can also make it harder to slow down and evaluate the reasoning carefully. And without that pause, weak arguments can spread very quickly. Recognizing how moral panic arguments develop doesn't mean every concern is invalid. Sometimes social problems really do require urgent responses. But understanding how fear can amplify certain narratives helps us ask better questions about the evidence behind those claims. Because the goal of examining arguments isn't to dismiss concern, it's to understand whether the reasoning behind them actually holds up. And that becomes much easier once we recognize the patterns.